Ambassador Xylax of the Centaurian Alliance watched with mild amusement as the first human diplomatic delegation arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters on New Meridian. The humans looked almost comically plain compared to the other species present. No ceremonial armor, no bioenhanced limbs, not even basic neural augmentations visible on their bodies. The lead human diplomat, Ambassador James Harrison, wore what they called a business suit, a simple dark fabric garment with no apparent defensive capabilities. His four assistants were similarly dressed, carrying only small data tablets and what appeared to be primitive communication devices. "Quite underwhelming, aren't they?" commented Grand Marshal Vrax, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming with embedded battle honors. The Centaurian military leader's voice carried the unmistakable tone of dismissal. "Intelligence reports classify them as a Level 2 civilization at best. Their primary weapons still rely on chemical propulsion." Xylax's secondary eyes tracked the humans as they moved through the grand reception hall. Something about their movement patterns triggered his instincts, but he couldn't quite identify what. "Perhaps," he responded carefully, "but they've managed to establish colonies on 3 systems in less than a century." "Luck and determination," scoffed Vrax. "Look at them, no combat augmentations, no ceremonial weapons. Even their civilian officials carry personal shield generators these days." The human delegation was being introduced to various ambassadors and officials. Harrison's assistants, 2 males and 2 females, maintained seemingly casual positions around him. Xylax noticed how they never blocked each other's lines of sight, how they subtly repositioned themselves whenever other delegations approached. "Tell me, Marshal," Xylax asked, "have you reviewed their military history?" "Primitive conflicts mostly confined to their homeworld, nothing suggesting they could pose a serious threat to established powers." Vrax's crystalline fingers clinked against his ceremonial plasma sword. "Though I admit their application to join the Defense Coalition was interesting." Xylax recalled the application. The humans had provided extensive documentation about their civilian space exploration and scientific achievements, but their military capabilities were described in surprisingly vague terms. When pressed for details about their armed forces, they simply stated that their military doctrine emphasized adaptability and discretion. A commotion near the main entrance drew their attention. A Proximan delegate had accidentally activated their ceremonial battle aura, causing a brief flash of psychic energy. Before Xylax could even process the disturbance, he noticed that the human assistants had already moved. Their casual poses had transformed into something else: precise, balanced stances that could enable immediate action. Harrison was suddenly at the center of a defensive formation. Just as quickly, they relaxed back into their previous positions. If Xylax hadn't been watching carefully, he would have missed it entirely. "Marshal," he said slowly, "what if we're misunderstanding their approach entirely? Every major species displays their military capability as a deterrent. We evolved in environments where showing strength prevented conflict." "Of course," Vrax replied. "It's a fundamental principle of galactic diplomacy. Even the Peace Singer Collective maintains visible defensive capabilities." "But humans evolved as pursuit predators on a death world," Xylax continued. "Their historical conflicts often involved combatants hiding among civilian populations. What if they've applied that same principle to their military doctrine?" Vrax's crystalline form shifted colors slightly, a sign of confusion. "What are you suggesting?" "Look at Harrison's assistants again. Really look at them. Notice how they're constantly scanning the room, how they maintain perfect coverage of all approaches while appearing to simply stand around. What if their apparent lack of military display isn't a sign of weakness but a deliberate strategy?" As if to emphasize his point, one of the human females smoothly intercepted a stumbling waiter before they could collide with Ambassador Harrison. Her movement was fluid, precise, and revealed years of combat training to Xylax's experienced eyes. "Impossible," Vrax muttered, but Xylax could hear uncertainty in his voice. "You're suggesting their diplomatic staff are actually military operators disguised as civilians? It would explain a lot about their approach to galactic relations." Xylax's secondary eyes tracked another human assistant casually positioning himself to cover a blind spot in the room's security coverage. And it raises an unsettling question. Which is, if these are their diplomats, what are their actual soldiers like? The grand reception continued, but Xylax noticed that Vrax's hand never strayed far from his ceremonial weapon after that. The humans continued their seemingly casual interactions, but Xylax couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching, always watching behind their disarming smiles and simple suits. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest military achievement wasn't developing superior weapons or defenses. It was mastering the art of hiding in plain sight. Intelligence Officer Nexra of the Rigelian Security Bureau prided herself on pattern recognition. Her species' neural architecture was specifically evolved for detecting anomalies, which made her perfect for analyzing potential threats to the Galactic Alliance. Right now, all her instincts were screaming that something was very wrong about Joint Operation Peaceful Harbor. The operation seemed simple enough on the surface. A multinational peacekeeping force protecting civilian shipping lanes from pirates in the Outer Rim. The human contingent had arrived 3 standard cycles ago. A single, civilian contractor vessel called the Star Merchant, claiming to provide logistical and medical support. Another interesting data point, Nexra's assistant, Kiv, reported. His tendrils rippled with excitement as he displayed a holographic report. The human vessel's power signature doesn't match their registered specifications. Let me guess, Nexra's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. Lower than expected. Exactly. Their engines are supposedly standard commercial grade, but they're operating at barely 30% of rated capacity. Either their equipment is incredibly inefficient, or they're hiding their true capabilities, Nexra finished. She pulled up the crew manifest for the Star Merchant. Captain Alina Walsh and her crew of 15 were listed as civilian contractors specializing in logistics and medical support. Their backgrounds were impeccably ordinary merchant marine service, civilian flight certifications, basic security training. Too ordinary, Nexra was beginning to suspect. Show me the incident reports from the last 2 encounters with pirates, she ordered. The holographic display shifted, showing tactical data from recent skirmishes. In both cases, the Star Merchant had maintained its position at the rear of the convoy, seemingly focusing on its support role. But something caught Nexra's attention. Freeze display at time index 4723. The image stopped, showing the moment when a pirate vessel had attempted to flank the convoy. Now overlay the Star Merchant's sensor shadow. The display updated, revealing a subtle anomaly. The human vessel's sensor profile had shifted slightly just before the pirate ship was intercepted by Alliance forces, almost as if it had briefly activated, and then concealed some kind of advanced scanning system. They knew the pirates were coming, Nexra murmured, before our own sensors detected them, but they didn't react. Because that would reveal their capabilities, Kiv concluded, his tendrils twisting in agitation. Nexra spent the next few hours digging deeper. The Star Merchant's crew maintained minimal contact with other vessels, citing cultural preferences. Their communications were strictly professional, their movements predictable. But when she analyzed their patrol patterns, she discovered they had subtly positioned themselves to provide optimal coverage of the convoy's blind spots. Captain Walsh's background is interesting, Kiv reported, bringing up another file. 20 years in the Merchant Marine, specialized in frontier routes, but there's a 3-year gap in her record about 15 years ago. Let me guess, classified human military operations. No, that's just it. According to their records, she was operating a small trading vessel in their frontier regions, but I cross-referenced with other databases. His tendrils rippled. There was significant military activity in those exact regions during that time period, counterinsurgency operations, they called them. Nexra's skin darkened with concern. She remembered the briefings about human military doctrine, how they often embedded operational forces within civilian populations, using mundane cover stories to mask their true capabilities. They're not just a support vessel, she realized. The whole operation is a cover. The Star Merchant is probably a heavily armed rapid response unit disguised as a civilian ship. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert. Pirates had been detected approaching the convoy, a larger force this time, at least 6 vessels. Nexra immediately accessed the tactical feed. The pirate ships emerged from FTL travel in an aggressive formation, clearly prepared for serious combat. The Alliance escort vessels moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. The pirates had timed their attack well. The Star Merchant maintained its position at the rear of the convoy, seemingly passive. But Nexra noticed subtle changes in its power signature. The supposedly civilian vessel was running dark, but its movements were too precise, too calculated. 3 pirate ships broke through the initial defense line, heading straight for the supposedly vulnerable support vessel. Nexra watched, fascinated, as the Star Merchant finally revealed its true nature. The civilian facade dropped like a discarded cloak. Hidden weapon ports opened along its hull. Its engines flared with previously concealed power. The vessel moved with impossible agility for its size, its crew displaying the kind of coordination that only came from years of military training. The engagement was over in minutes. The pirate ships were disabled with surgical precision, their crews never even getting close enough to realize they had attacked a wolf in sheep's clothing. As quickly as it had happened, the Star Merchant powered down its weapons and resumed its civilian pretense. The after-action report would describe how the Alliance escorts had successfully repelled the attack, with the human vessel providing minor support. "Delete that sensor data," Nexra ordered Kiv. "All of it." "But regulations require." "Trust me," she interrupted, her skin shifting to a deep, knowing blue. "The humans aren't the only ones who understand the value of keeping certain capabilities hidden. Let them maintain their deception." She stared at the tactical display, watching the Star Merchant resume its seemingly innocuous patrol pattern. The humans had taken the basic principle of military deception and elevated it to an art form. They didn't just hide their warships, they hid them in plain sight, wrapped in layers of mundane disguise. "Sometimes," she mused, "the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all." The Star Merchant continued its patrol, just another civilian vessel supporting galactic peace. But Nexra now understood what she was really seeing, a glimpse of humanity's true military doctrine, where every civilian ship could potentially be a deadly warship in disguise, and where the line between merchant and warrior was deliberately, skillfully blurred. Director Thrix of Galactic Security wouldn't have noticed anything unusual about the human embassy's maintenance staff if he hadn't been specifically watching them. The 4 workers moved through their daily routines with mundane predictability, fixing environmental controls, updating computer systems, tending to the small garden of earth plants in the courtyard. Their documentation was impeccable. Marcus Rodriguez, environmental systems specialist; Diana Wells, computer technician; Jun Park, facilities coordinator; Thomas O'Brien, botanical specialist. All with standard civilian credentials, routine background checks, and the expected employment histories. But Thrix had spent enough time studying humans to spot the subtle signs. The way they maintained perfect situational awareness while appearing absorbed in their tasks. How they had gradually positioned themselves throughout key areas of the embassy over the past month. The carefully coordinated shift schedules that ensured at least 2 of them were always on duty. "They're preparing for something," he muttered, his crystalline sensory nodes vibrating with tension. His suspicions were validated 3 days later when the Orion separatists launched their attack. The explosion at the embassy's main gate was precisely calculated enough force to overwhelm the shields, but not enough to cause structural damage. 20 armed attackers breached the perimeter, their tactical gear marked with the distinctive crimson insignia of the militant faction. Thrix watched through the security feeds as the attackers moved with military precision toward the ambassador's office. Standard protocol would have the human diplomatic staff retreating to hardened safe rooms, protected by dedicated security forces. But humans, he was learning, rarely followed standard protocol. The feed from the environmental control room showed Marcus Rodriguez calmly locking down his console before reaching beneath his workstation. The maintenance coveralls came off in one smooth motion, revealing tactical gear underneath. A hidden compartment in the wall yielded weapons and equipment that definitely weren't part of standard maintenance tools. In the garden, Thomas O'Brien was already moving. His gardening tools abandoned, he produced a compact rifle from a hidden cache beneath the plant beds. The seemingly decorative layout of the garden, Thrix now realized, provided perfect firing positions covering all approaches to the building. Diana Wells, the computer technician, had sealed herself in the control room. Her fingers flew across multiple screens, executing what appeared to be pre-planned security protocols far beyond the capability of a normal IT worker. Security systems that the attackers thought they had disabled suddenly reactivated in devastating combinations. Jun Park, the facility's coordinator, was escorting embassy staff to safety. His movements were those of a veteran combat operator, not a building manager. The routine maintenance updates he had been performing over the past month had actually been establishing fallback positions and escape routes. The attackers never had a chance. Caught between precisely coordinated defensive positions, their advance stalled. Wells' control of the building's systems turned every corridor into a tactical nightmare. O'Brien's shots from concealed positions in the garden picked off anyone trying to establish a fallback position outside. Rodriguez and Park worked in perfect synchronization, demonstrating the kind of teamwork that only came from years of joint operations. They weren't just security personnel playing maintenance workers. They were elite military operators executing a long-planned defensive strategy. The entire attack was neutralized in less than 10 minutes. By the time local security forces arrived, the maintenance staff had already secured the attackers and were calmly providing medical aid to the wounded. Their tactical gear and weapons had disappeared, replaced by their mundane work clothes. Thrix accessed the embassy's personnel files again, this time digging deeper. The backgrounds he had initially found were perfect too perfect. He began cross-referencing dates and locations. Rodriguez's environmental systems certification coincided with a classified human military operation in their colonies. Wells had supposedly been working IT jobs during several major counterterrorism operations. Park's facilities management experience overlapped with the establishment of human military bases in contested regions. They hide their best warriors behind the most ordinary facades, Thrix realized. The maintenance staff's mundane appearance wasn't just a cover, it was a deliberate strategy. Human military doctrine had evolved beyond mere camouflage. They had learned to hide their operators in plain sight, wrapped in layers of carefully constructed normalcy. The after-action report would describe how the embassy's security systems and staff had repelled the attack. There would be no mention of the maintenance workers' true capabilities. Their identities and skills would remain hidden behind their everyday roles, ready to be deployed again when needed. In the days following the attack, Thrix watched the 4 humans return to their routine duties. Rodriguez fixing climate controls, Wells updating computer systems, Park managing the facility, O'Brien tending his gardens. They moved with the same practiced mundanity as before, their lethal capabilities once again concealed beneath a veneer of ordinary civilian life. But now, when Thrix looked at any human civilian installation, he couldn't help but wonder. How many more wolves were hidden in plain sight, disguised as everyday sheep? How many ordinary workers, technicians, and staff members were actually highly trained operators, waiting for the moment when their true skills would be needed? The humans had taken the art of military deception to its logical extreme. In their world, the most dangerous predators weren't the ones who displayed their strength. They were the ones who hid it behind the facade of mundane civilian life, invisible until the moment they chose to strike. Admiral Vexther of the Arcturus Defense Fleet had never felt more uneasy about a peaceful situation. The human trade delegation's visit to Station Omega should have been a routine diplomatic event. Instead, he found himself obsessively reviewing security footage, trying to determine which of the 37 human visitors were actually military operators in disguise. "The medical conference team concerns me," Lieutenant Rax reported, her bioluminescent patterns reflecting anxiety. Dr. Rachel Foster gave a presentation on emergency trauma care that showed suspicious familiarity with combat injuries. "Another one?" Vexther's secondary appendages twitched in frustration. "That makes 3 of their medical personnel with possible military backgrounds." The security feeds showed Dr. Foster discussing medical procedures with other conference attendees. Her behavior was perfectly professional, her credentials impeccable. But there was something about the way she moved, how her eyes constantly tracked station security patterns. "Cross-reference her background with known human military operations," he ordered. "Already did, sir." Rax brought up a holographic display. "She supposedly ran a civilian medical clinic in their outer colonies during the period of their frontier pacification campaign. The timing and location match several major military engagements, but there's no direct connection." "Of course not," Vexther muttered. "They're too careful for that." The past month had seen a station-wide paranoia develop regarding human visitors. The embassy incident on New Meridian had revealed how humans concealed elite operators as maintenance staff. The Star Merchant incident proved they disguised warships as civilian vessels. Now, every human visitor was viewed as a potential military asset in disguise. "What about their trade representatives?" Vexther pulled up footage of the 3 humans negotiating mineral rights with station authorities. "Michael Chen, corporate lawyer; Olivia Davidson, geological survey expert; William Torres, financial analyst." Rax's tendrils rippled. "Their backgrounds are thorough, but Chen's legal career has several gaps that coincide with human military operations in disputed territories. Davidson's survey work often took her to strategically significant locations. Torres worked for companies that we now suspect were fronts for human military intelligence." Vexther studied the footage. The 3 humans were conducting perfectly normal trade negotiations. Their behavior was professional, their expertise evident. Yet he noticed how they had gradually positioned themselves in key locations throughout the station during their stay. How their movements, while appearing random, created a comprehensive coverage pattern. "They're mapping our security," he realized. "Every human visitor, regardless of their apparent purpose, is gathering intelligence. The medical conference lets them assess our emergency response capabilities. The trade negotiations give them access to strategic resource information." "Sir," Rax interrupted, her bioluminescence pulsing with urgency, "I've been analyzing their civilian technical support staff, the ones maintaining their delegation's communications equipment." The display shifted to show 2 humans working on computer systems. Their movements were precise, efficient, and familiar to anyone who had studied military communications specialists. "Let me guess," Vexther's voice carried resigned understanding. "Their work patterns suggest advanced tactical communications training." "Yes, sir. And their equipment, while apparently standard civilian gear, shows power signatures consistent with military-grade hardware operating in stealth mode." The realization hit Vexther like a plasma burst. Every human-civilian mission served multiple purposes. Medical personnel who could establish combat field hospitals. Trade representatives who could coordinate military operations. Technical staff who could convert civilian communications into tactical networks. "They're not just hiding individual operators," he said slowly. "Their entire civilian presence is a military capability in disguise. Any human diplomatic mission, trade delegation, or scientific expedition could potentially transform into a fully operational military unit." The security feeds continued to show normal civilian activities. Dr. Foster teaching emergency medical procedures that could save lives or support combat operations. The trade team analyzing resources that could fuel either commerce or war. Technical staff maintaining communications that could switch from civilian to military use in moments. "How do we defend against this?" Rax asked, her bioluminescence dimmed with concern. "We don't," Vexther replied. That's what makes it so effective. We can't treat every human civilian as a potential military operator. It would make peaceful relations impossible, and they know this. He watched the human visitors continue their seemingly mundane activities, each one possibly concealing years of military training beneath their civilian expertise. The humans had created the perfect infiltration strategy, one that couldn't be countered without appearing hostile and paranoid. Their greatest deception, he concluded, isn't just hiding warriors among civilians. It's making their civilian and military capabilities inseparable. Every human who walks onto this station might be exactly what they appear to be, or they might be an elite operator gathering intelligence, establishing infrastructure, or preparing for future operations. The station's daily activities continued, but their new things would never be the same. The humans had introduced a new paradigm of military capability, one where the line between civilian and soldier was intentionally blurred, where every peaceful interaction could serve multiple purposes, and where the most dangerous operatives were the ones who appeared most harmless. The wolves weren't just hidden among the sheep. They had learned to wear the wool so perfectly that no one could tell the difference until it was too late. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council wasn't going well. Grand Marshal Kravax of the Centaurian Empire stood before the assembled representatives, his crystalline form pulsing with barely contained agitation. "We must implement immediate restrictions on human civilian activities within Alliance space," he demanded. "Their so-called diplomatic missions and trade delegations are clearly military operations in disguise." Ambassador Lyra of the Rigelian Confederation rose in opposition, her neural tendrils glowing with diplomatic restraint. "And how do you propose we do that, Marshal? Should we treat every human doctor, engineer, or trader as a potential military operative?" The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. The recent revelations about human military doctrine had sparked a crisis of trust throughout the Alliance. Some demanded strict controls on human civilian activities. Others argued that such restrictions would make peaceful cooperation impossible. In the observation gallery, Fleet Intelligence Director Nix watched the debate with growing concern. After 30 cycles studying human military capabilities, she understood better than most why both sides were missing the point. "Director Nix," the council chair's voice cut through the chaos, "you've prepared a comprehensive analysis of human military doctrine. Please share your findings." Nix moved to the central platform, her adaptive camouflage adjusting to formal presentation mode. The chamber fell silent as she activated the holographic display. "Honorable representatives," she began, "we've been approaching this situation from the wrong perspective. We keep trying to separate human civilian and military capabilities, but that distinction doesn't exist in their strategic doctrine." The display showed footage from various incidents. The embassy attack where maintenance workers revealed elite combat skills, the Star Merchant defending against pirates, medical personnel establishing combat hospitals during crisis response. Humans evolved on a death world where their early conflicts rarely had clear battle lines, Nix continued. They learned to hide their warriors among civilian populations because showing military strength often made them targets. This shaped their entire approach to warfare. She shifted the display to show human historical data. "While we developed distinct warrior castes and visible military hierarchies, humans developed what they call integrated capability. Their civilian expertise isn't a cover for military operations. It's an integral part of their defensive doctrine. That doctor who can save lives in an emergency, she can also establish a combat medical facility. The engineer maintaining communication systems. His civilian expertise makes him more effective at tactical communications. The trade representative analyzing resource distribution. She understands exactly how to disrupt enemy supply lines." The council chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. Nix continued, "We've been asking the wrong question. It's not about identifying which humans are military operators in disguise. In their system, every civilian skill can have military applications. Every peaceful capability can be repurposed for defense." "So what do you suggest?" the council chair asked. How do we maintain security? We adapt, Nix replied simply. The humans have shown us a fundamental flaw in our traditional military doctrine. We separate our civilian and military capabilities, making both more vulnerable. They integrate them, making every civilian asset a potential military resource. She gestured to tactical displays showing various human-civilian installations. Their embassies aren't just diplomatic posts, they're potential operation centers. Their trade missions don't just establish commercial ties, they create logistics networks that could support military operations. Their civilian ships don't just transport goods, they provide coverage for their entire fleet. But that's precisely why they can't be trusted, Marshal Kravax interrupted. Every human civilian could be a military asset in disguise. No, Nix corrected. Every human civilian is a potential military asset, and they've never hidden this fact. We just didn't understand what we were seeing. Their strength isn't in deception, it's in integration. The end.